2 days after the funeral, I was still in my grandmother's kitchen, not because there was anything left to do, but because leaving felt like closing something improperly. She had systems for everything. Jars labeled in a careful slant, dates written smaller beneath. A thin ledger in the second drawer from the stove, where she tracked expenses in pencil, always rounded down. Even now, the place didn't feel abandoned, just paused. I rinsed the same cup 3 times before realizing I hadn't used it. My phone buzzed against the counter. I didn't look at it right away. There was a kind of quiet I hadn't had in years, and I didn't want to break it too quickly. When I did, it was my brother. "We're in the Maldives. Wi-Fi is spotty. Can't access Grandma's account. Did you change anything?" No mention of the funeral, not even a delayed acknowledgement. Just logistics, as if grief were a task he'd scheduled and missed. I set the phone down without replying. It wasn't surprising. He had always been good at maintaining distance in ways that sounded reasonable. Work trips, timing issues, flights that didn't line up. He never refused outright, just never quite arrived. I dried my hands on a towel that was already dry. The ledger was still in the drawer. I slid it open, ran my thumb along the edge of the paper. Her handwriting grew less steady in the last few pages, but the structure never changed. Dates, numbers, small notes to herself. Order, even as things slipped. There had been a conversation, weeks before the hospital, not dramatic. No declarations. She was sitting at this same table, tapping her pen lightly against the page. "People don't always mean harm," she had said, not looking at me, "but they do assume things belong to them if no one says otherwise." I didn't respond then. It hadn't felt like a question. Another buzz. "Hello? I'm serious. I can't get in. Need to check something." Then, a minute later, "Did you freeze it or something?" I turned the phone face down. At first, I told myself I wasn't answering because I didn't know what to say. That was partly true. But there was something else underneath it. Something steadier. A recognition, maybe, that for once I didn't have to respond on his timeline. I had already done what needed to be done. The week before she died, I sat with her at the bank. Not because she asked directly, but because she had started repeating small concerns. Bills paid twice, a letter she couldn't remember opening, and then once, very clearly. I don't want confusion later. We spoke to a representative. Quiet, procedural. Papers were explained, signed. The account wasn't erased or hidden. It was moved, structured differently, documented in a way that didn't rely on assumption. 235,000 doesn't make noise when it shifts. No alarm, no visible marker. Just a different line in a system that remembers everything. My phone lit up again. This is not funny. I almost smiled at that, not out of amusement, but recognition. He thought this was a moment that could be corrected quickly. A call, an explanation, a reset back to how things usually worked. I picked up the phone, unlocked it, read the next message. "Call me." Now I set it down again. The kettle clicked softly behind me, though I hadn't turned it on. Just the metal settling into room temperature. Small sounds that filled space without asking anything. Another message came through, longer this time. "If you did something, you need to tell me. This affects both of us." That word, both, sat strangely on the screen. For years, both had meant something flexible. It stretched to cover his absence, his assumptions, his easy way of stepping into decisions after they'd already been handled. I didn't feel angry reading it, just aware. The call came next. I watched it ring until it stopped. And then finally, something shifted, not from him, but from outside us. An email notification appeared. Subject line formal, impersonal. From the bank. I opened it. They were confirming what we had arranged. Documentation completed. Access parameters defined. A note that all relevant parties had been notified. He wouldn't need me to explain anything. A minute later, my phone rang again. I answered this time, but I didn't speak first. "What did you do?" His voice was tight, stripped of the usual ease. I leaned against the counter, looking at the small crack in the tile near the sink. It had been there for years. My grandmother used to say it wasn't worth fixing unless it spread. "It's been handled," I said. "What does that mean?" He sounded like he was walking, maybe pacing. "I just got an email. There's some kind of restriction. And they're saying what we agreed to," I said evenly. "We?" The word came out sharper than the others. I wasn't part of anything. I let that sit for a second. Not to punish him, just to let it exist without softening it. "She didn't want confusion," I said. There was a pause on the line. "Not long, but different. Less movement in it." "You moved the money?" he asked. "Quieter now. It's secure," I said. "Documented. Nothing's missing." "That's not the point," he said quickly, but the urgency had changed shape. It wasn't about access anymore. It was about position. Another email came through as we spoke, this one copied to both of us. A follow-up from the bank representative, outlining next steps, formal language wrapping the situation in something neither of us could reinterpret. "I'll call them," he said. "There has to be a way to—" "You can," I said. "They'll explain it." He didn't respond right away. I could hear the shift, the moment where this stopped being a conversation between siblings and became something else, a boundary reinforced by people who didn't know us and didn't need to. "This isn't how she would wanted it," he said finally, but there was less certainty in it. I looked around the kitchen, the jars, the labels, the ledger still open in the drawer. "It is," I said, not firmly, just clearly. He exhaled, something like frustration or disbelief, and then the line went quiet. "I'll figure it out," he said, more to himself than to me. "I know," I replied. We ended the call without anything resembling resolution. The kitchen felt the same afterward, but I didn't. I closed the drawer, sliding the ledger back into place. For a moment, I rested my hand on it, not out of sentiment, but acknowledgement. Of her, of the structure she kept, of the way she had trusted me to carry something through without making it bigger than it was. There was no sense of victory in it, just a steadiness that hadn't been there before. Outside, a car passed, the sound brief and unimportant. I picked up the cup again, dried it properly this time, and set it back where it belonged. The room didn't ask me to stay anymore.